The start of a new build then, always a moment of excitement and trepidation to a certain extent as to how it's going to turn out. This then being the Cargotrans C160, often misnamed a Hercules, of which it is not. Amused to see the decals here on the model for the US AF. In fact, this plane was never operated by the US, it being a German-French collaboration. The waters being even further muddied by the description here as quad or twin, there apparently being a 4-engine version of it. Some interesting instructions in Chinglish, and I was amused to see in the back here, where is it? The installation showing a 72 megahertz FM radio installation. That gives some indication of the age of this kit. Perhaps even originally it had brushed motors, I know not, but it definitely has been around a while. The build itself is not quite as straightforward as some kits, as it's necessary to cut out all of the control surfaces and hinge them yourself. You can see a raft of extra bits in here, some vacuum formed engine nacelles, a bag of bits including the hinge material and the wheels and such like. It's going to be an enjoyable build. I'm going to see if it will fly on these 4-bladed quadcopter type blades, see how we get on with that. It looks to be an interesting build then, I think, and hopefully at some point we'll actually get to fly something. A couple of weeks ago the ban on travel was lifted, only to be followed by some appalling weather and high winds, which persist to this day, but things can only improve as spring is just around the corner. Let's now then get started with the build. You'll be relieved to hear that I'm not going to go through every single step in the instructions. I will just point out anything which I find confusing and add some clarification. It describes then how to cut the various tubes for the control rods, the elevator, rudder and the steerable nose wheel. In the left hand side of the fuselage then we have the tube that goes for the nose gear, and the tube on the other side they incorrectly say is for the elevator. In fact, it's for the rudder. The elevator comes out below the fuselage on the right hand side. There are 2 of these captive nuts to install, the captive part being on the inside of the model, and you can simply line those up with the channel which is moulded there for the screw to go in. So those will be glued into there. With the tubes and these plates glued in place, we can then join the 2 fuselage halves. Now, there is some very greasy, slippery, sort of maybe mould release or something on this foam. I recommend then, where you're going to glue it, to give it a quick sand over to abrade it. That will enable the glue to stick more easily. I'll get on and do that now. The nose gear assembly is reasonably straightforward once you've worked out one of the mysteries. It shows this piece here. Supplied is just the plastic top part, and then you have this piece which you have to remove the nut from and then screw those 2 pieces together. To tighten this up fully, we're going to need to put something through the boss there and hold the end of the nylon plastic piece, being careful of course not to strip it. Now we have our mystery item, we can go ahead and put it together, ignoring the fact that in the other part of the instructions it actually shows it as a little right-angled bracket, which it's not. It's been replaced by this piece here. Now we can go ahead and glue the support for the nose wheel into place. The assembly of the undercarriage then presented no challenges in particular. Obviously you need to open out the holes to take the screws there. That secures it at the back. At the front you have this plastic piece with 2 pegs, and they engage in the ply plate, and again you have to open the holes out behind that for those pieces to pass into. So that's quite neat. The only other thing that I've added is a washer here above the ply plate, so that when you tighten that down it's not going to deform the wood there. That rolls along quite nicely. Moving on then, the horizontal stabilizer assembly. I've gone ahead and done that. Again, no particular challenges. I'm not going to go through every single step. Once you've got the hang of cutting these control surfaces out and chamfering them, maybe I've left too large a gap there, but it's nice and free. Of course, you have to insert the wire provided there to link the two elevator halves. A similar procedure for the rudder, and again on the ailerons. I've left this one loose so that I can show you. Essentially, you cut the part out and then make yourself a line on the midpoint, mark out where you're going to put the hinges. Life is made a lot easier if you have a proper hinge slotter. Just dry fit those connections there. I'll be able to loosen that up a little, stop it rubbing once it's sinoed into place, and you will need some foam safe sino for all of those hinge joints. I'll get on and finish off the wings then, and then we'll see about the final assembly, at least of the polystyrene parts. Made good progress now. The wing is completely assembled. Clearly you need to stick the two halves together. I've just usually used some masking tape to hold those pieces together, and whilst that was drying, I also, using epoxy, this is the first time I used epoxy on this model, epoxied the carbon fibre reinforcement spar into there. Before putting the epoxy, it's a good idea, as I mentioned, to rub down the inside of the polystyrene there, give it some grip, and I also did the same with the carbon tube. Once the carbon tube has been sanded, give that a wipe over with some alcohol as well to remove the fine dust, and that should stick in there nicely. On the fuselage then, we've glued on the rudder and elevator assembly. What you need to do is to cut out a little bit of the foam here to allow the control rod to pass through, in this case to the rudder. What I've done there clearly is just to temporarily put the control rod into place to give me a line in which I can cut the foam until that's running nice and freely. Lastly, on the wing assembly, you have the same arrangement as for the undercarriage of the plate with the two pegs and the ply plate here, which I've put an additional washer on once again. That then is going to slot into place there and screw down at the back there. I won't bother to put that all the way in, and it's looking very aeroplane shaped. In part 2 then we'll have a look at the installation of all the necessary electronics and the assembly of the motor nacelles. Any questions or comments? Leave them below. Many thanks for watching.